And we are broadcasting live. It's 11:59 if you're joining us. Thank you guys for joining us today on the podcast, on the webinar, excuse me. Mr. Sahil Mansuri, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing wonderfully, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us and bringing your massive wisdom about referrals.
Everything I know, I learned from the guy next to me here in Mr. Walkup. So just hurry up and introduce him. That's who everyone wants to hear from. Nobody cares about.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Yeah, it is 12 o'clock Pacific time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Next up, I am going to introduce Mr. Kevin Walkup with Salesloft. How are you doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing well, guys. Super excited for this chat today and help spreading the love to everybody else that wants to learn about referral-based sales.
Yeah, I mean, referrals are the way to go. And I know that it's a way that you've grown your business tremendously. And obviously, Sahil, this is something near and dear to your heart. So thanks you guys both for joining us and imparting your wisdom.
Absolutely.
So it's about 12:01. We've got the participants starting to stream in. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Let's go ahead and kick it off. We'll try to make sure that everybody gets maximum value for your time here during your lunch period out on the West Coast, or as you get later in the day on the East Coast. So Sahil, I'll kick it off with you. You've lived and breathed referrals most of your career. You've had a tremendous amount of success. Let's just level set with definitions. What is a referral? What do you call a referral in sales? And what's your definition when you think about that word?
Yeah, David, I think that there are a few different forms that referrals take, but every great salesperson knows that your best sources of new leads are warm intros from your network. One of the things that's weird about sales is that there's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde relationship that you often have with your prospects, in that when you first reach out to someone as a salesperson, there's this natural defense mechanism that most buyers have that's like, oh gosh, another salesperson, stay away. And it is only when you're able to break through that noise and then you're able to actually build a relationship with that person that they then can view you as a trusted advisor, as a consultant, as somebody who can help solve their problems, and all the other things that we're also familiar with here in sales. But it's that initial piece. It's that initial building that bridge of trust between the buyer and the seller, that is so difficult in sales. And especially for your audience here, David, the SDR, fighting that battle every day. And what I define a referral as is somebody who is willing to stake their reputation on the fact that it is worth a buyer, one of their peers' time to meet with you, right? So it's basically somebody saying, hey, look, I've already vetted David. I know David's a good guy. I know that he's going to take care of you the way that I would. So Kevin, why don't you take a few minutes to meet with him? And so it's the parlaying of trust that has been built between myself and Kevin, and taking that and transferring it over to David is the way that I see referrals.
It's a transfer of trust. Excellent. And Kevin, is that kind of how you would define referrals as well, just a level set?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that relationship building is so important. And one of the good things about referrals, it doesn't have to happen today or tomorrow. Referrals can happen a year from now. So what's great about it is building those relationships that are going to stay with you over time, building your personal brand on LinkedIn, and making yourself memorable. So when people come back to your product or get referred to you, they see, oh, this person's actually a credible person that I should be doing business with. So I'm going to actually accept this referral that was passed over to me.
Okay, excellent. And so, from a sales development perspective, we kind of understand now what a referral looks like. From a sales development perspective, how would you go about establishing that trust, building those relationships, and then, ultimately asking for a referral?
So one thing that is super important with referral-based sales is not being scared to ask for referrals. You're not going to get as many of them if you don't ask for them. So breaking through that initial awkwardness phase, or that feeling where you feel selfish by asking for them, people are willing to give referrals, especially if you've done a great job as an SDR, creating that initial value where you can pass that opportunity off to your AE. A lot of the opportunities that are passed to me from my SDR team, I'll look back and I'll see that conversation was actually started with a referral in the subject line. Hey, I was referred to you by David Delaney. He said that we should be having a conversation. So when that referral sees that name in the subject line is going to immediately trigger them to not just have them open that email, but read through it and see, okay, this person was referred to me. I should at least read through this and engage with this person in some regard.
Gotcha. Okay. And Sahil, what do you think? How would you build up that trust, at first, and then begin to, ask for referrals if you're coming at it from a sales development perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my days at Sales Predict. We had this one SDR who joined the team, this guy named Tiernan O'Donoghue, and Tiernan was like a magician when it came to building relationships. And what he started with is what he knew best. So he was Irish, right? And he'd come from Ireland to San Francisco. And so he went on LinkedIn and he tried to find every single, at Sales Predict, we were selling to VPs of sales and VPs of marketing. He would try to find every single VP of sales or VP of marketing, director of sales, no matter who it was, who was Irish. And he would reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm from Ireland. And he had a fantastic accent that I won't butcher here. But he would get on and he would just be very Irish with them, right? And he would connect with them. And I remember he would just set a ton of meetings through it. He used to play rugby. So he went on LinkedIn and he found everybody that had an interest in rugby. And he reached out to them and said, hey, I used to play rugby. We should talk about it. And so, what he did was he found common ground with people, and he was memorable and he was different. And he reached out to prospects as people and didn't reach out to them as like, oh, I've got another 1,000 emails to send, so I'm just going to go through and send something. And so once he started building those relationships, A, he was able to get a bunch of meetings. But B, because those people knew him not as Tiernan O'Donoghue SDR at Sales Predict, but it was more like Tiernan O'Donoghue, my Irish buddy, then he was able to parlay that into getting referrals and intros into other people through their networks. And so it doesn't take you having 20 years of sales experience and a deep Rolodex in order to get referrals. You just got to start with what you know, what's genuine about yourself, build authentic relationships with people. And then, as Kevin said, don't be scared to ask, because people are actually willing to open up their networks for people they like. So build that relationship and then leverage it in order to do business.
It sounds like you're starting from a human perspective versus just like, I've got to send out, thousands of emails, make thousands of phone calls. You're actually taking it from where can I make a connection with someone on a human basis, build that trust, add value first, and kind of plant the seeds, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been this really focus on activity, right? It's like, okay, we got to get the right activity numbers, and we have all these sales ops managers that are tracking all this stuff, and we have all these, we have all this emphasis around volume. And that's not to say that volume isn't important, right? I mean, of course, volume is important. If you sit at home and don't make any phone calls and don't send out any emails, no one's going to know who you are. So you got to get out there, right? Obviously, but volume is not correlated to quality of outreach. And I think that one of the mistakes that people make is they try to rush through and fire off. I saw on LinkedIn the other day, someone posted that they had done 671 cold calls in one day, right? And they were so proud. They're like, I did 671 cold calls today. And there was all these comments from all these SDRs being like, wow, that's amazing. What awesome hustle. What great grit you have. And to be honest, I mean, I've bought a lot of technology while selling as well, and I've bought a lot of things. I've never wanted to buy from someone who had a lot of hustle, right? I never wanted to buy from someone because they had a lot of grit. I wanted to buy from someone because they were a good person, right? They were a great male or female seller who built an authentic relationship with me, that was somebody that I trusted and wanted to do business with and was teaching me things that I didn't know. And so I think that, as an SDR, yes, activity matters, but building an authentic relationship and a connection with someone is the fundamental building block upon which sales is done. And I think, we ignore that at our own peril.
I think so. And Kevin, if you're an SDR or you're running a SDR team and you're going, how do I build that trust from, pretty early in my career? Like, I don't know a lot of people and, I'm starting out. How do I kind of build that foundation, build that trust so that I can begin to, foster relationships and build referrals?
So one of the things that, and Sahil will probably laugh at this, that I like to talk about often is putting a 10 on everybody's head that you're going to do business with. I learned that from Ralph Barcy years ago, and just building that relationship of being someone that is genuine, like Sahil mentioned, being authentic in the way that you're engaging them. People are going to remember that and come back to you when they're having that conversation, drinking beers with their buddies. Hey, I worked with this SDR over here that he was fantastic. He provided value. He gave me 3 things before he asked for anything. So giving to get is really big as you're building those relationships. I was working with a guy just recently. It was last week. He had an order form in hand. We went out to dinner, and over dinner, he learned that I was an avid golfer. And, we've started finding common ground amongst each other. And one of the things he's like, well, and he was a big golfer as well. He's like, well, if I knew you were a golfer, I would have signed that order form a month ago. So like having that chance to actually like talk about not business, but talk about things that, like Sahil mentioned, they're Irish or they're into these interests on LinkedIn, making a connection there where you can talk about just being regular people and then talk about business, build that relationship on the forefront, become a friend, become a trusted advisor, and then start talking business is what I found. And like I mentioned earlier, like that doesn't have to happen on the first interaction that you have with these people. Just start off that relationship, understand who they are as a person, how they want to be engaged with. And then from there, you can start to come in with your asks and talk about, setting up that demo to pass over.
Yeah, those are great. I mean, and a couple of things that I was thinking of is on social media, a lot of us are inside sales people and we're not necessarily out in the field, but social media offers a great way to add value to the community and especially identify, kind of the people that you want to talk to. What are their main issues and how can I help to solve those problems with them through whatever medium it is, a webinar like this or a blog post or a podcast or something like that, so that you become a resource and just kind of build that foundation and that trust from, your office where you're not necessarily out. Another quick thing was, we just got back from the Rainmaker conference where, I think we have so much screen time and little interaction with actual human beings that if you can, I would try to get out as much as possible. Get out of your office, go to like meetups and go to conferences. The Sales Development Conference coming up August 30th. Go to Rainmaker, like go out. I just went to a meetup on Tuesday and like, I didn't go around and like try to pitch, Tenbound services and all that stuff. I did it a little bit, but mostly it was just like talking to people, seeing what they're into, if I could help them out, connecting them with some way, trying to put that value out in the community because, instead of just blasting out, cold emails or pitching people, Sahil, what are some ways that you would suggest, like if you're kind of starting out in your career or you don't know that many people and you're in an office, are any other ways that you can think of to start to build that trust in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's really interesting what you said there, David, because you started by saying we're all inside salespeople, and then social media provides this way of connecting with people. I see a lot of interaction on social media that is extremely self-serving and it just reeks. It just absolutely reeks of like, I'm definitely trying to like build a relationship with you using some manufactured tactic that like some sales trainer taught me, right? And I'm not a fan of it, right? I think that you have to start by being authentic and genuine, right? The reason why back to Walkup story that you made that connection is because you actually are an avid golfer, right? Like you actually enjoy golf. And so you're able to sit down and talk about who's going to win the Masters and is Tiger back and, you know, and have an authentic conversation. And as soon as you do that, this artificial construct of like, I am a salesperson, you are a buyer, we must interact in this way goes away. And all of a sudden it's just a couple people having a conversation. And I think that is so critical to being a successful salesperson, is to make the buyer forget that they're in a sales process and start to reposition yourself as just another friend that they interact with who just happens to be a friend that does this for a career, right? And I think that that's a really important point. Now, to what you were saying specifically, David, which is how do I, as a salesperson who doesn't know a lot of people, come in and build a network? I mean, look, I spent the first 3 years of my career in media monitoring, like selling to PR professionals. And then David and I have known each other for a long time. We actually started at Glassdoor on the same day, almost exactly 7 years ago. And I didn't know anything about HR, right? I knew nothing about HR, I knew nothing about recruiting. And at the time, as David will attest, you know, there was no concept of an SDR at Glassdoor, right? You were responsible for hunting your own leads and getting your own meetings and then converting those meetings into deals. And I had no network at all in HR. But what I did was I immersed myself into the world of recruiting in HR, right? I basically read every single blog that I could get my hands on. I started setting up Google alerts for all of my prospect accounts and tagging it with keywords around hiring initiatives and with recruiting and the VP of HR and CHRO and figuring out what's happening in their world. I started attending conferences. I started reaching out to my friends and my parents and being like, hey, like my dad worked at Cisco systems at the time, and I reached out to him and I was like, hey, can you connect me with your HR department so I can just sit down and pick their brain on what it means, you know, what does an HR person even do, right? Because I think a lot of times SDRs are like, oh, I'm going to like read this canned script about like how our product works, right? With no context on how it's actually going to impact how it's going to impact the world of the buyer, right? And I think that before you can sell software, you have to know how to actually use it. And what I mean by use it is not like the bells and whistles and features of it. I mean, like, what is the person actually going to do with it, right? And I think that one of the reasons why Kevin has been so successful at selling Salesloft is because he uses it. Right? He knows because, and Kevin, you can tell this story, but I don't want to steal your thunder. I think it's such a good story though, of, you know, being a salesperson and then being introduced to Salesloft and being like, oh man, like my life would be so much better if I had access to a tool like this. And then there's that genuine passion that you have of like, hey, you know, I actually need to use a tool like this. This tool made my life better. I can also show you how it will make your life better. And so having domain expertise and having a firm grasp of how your buyer is actually going to use your service is a key point, is a key foundation that you need to have as an SDR in order to be able to truly communicate value. Because otherwise it's all just words, right? It's like, oh, we're going to optimize your marketing spend. Well, if you've never had a marketing budget, then how are you going to know what that means? But guess what? Even if you don't know any VPs of marketing, I bet your company has one, right? Yeah. Grab that person and actually sit down with them and be like, how do you spend, you know, your marketing dollars? Have them introduce you to their other friends who are marketing directors. Sit down and learn from them as to how they spend their money. And then all of a sudden, when you're having a conversation, it won't just be a bunch of empty words. You'll actually have some credibility. And I think that's a really important point when you're trying to build a real relationship with someone.
I love that. Put yourself in their shoes, figure out how to solve their problems. Now, Kevin, as you've been working with Salesloft and you've become more familiar in it, how did you start to, you know, become a domain expert in it and then be able to connect those dots for people?
So, you know, like kind of like Sahil mentioned, being, an expert in your space, one thing that is imperative for all, not just all SDRs or all salespeople, is all people in general should be reading. Educate yourself in things that you're interested in. And it doesn't just have to be self-help books, but, reading books that you can then bring back to the table and say, oh, in that conversation, oh, by the way, I was reading this great book last week, and that's going to, like, to Sahil's point, is give you credibility. And so I think it's really important to be well read so you can be well versed. And David, back to your other point about for the inside sales reps that are listening to this, one of the best practices that I've seen and be very effective, and it kind of comes back to the giving mentality, is on those social networks, you see a great post that might be unique to somebody, just mention that person's name on LinkedIn. Say, hey, just read this, thought it'd be a good article for you to check out. No ask, no nothing, just, hey, here's me giving you something. I thought of you specifically and wanted to mention you. Now, don't go and put 75 people's names in there, and be a little bit more authentic in the way that you're doing it. But, get out there and provide that give back. And, as to answer your most recent question, the passion and enthusiasm that you have, people can hear it when you're talking about it, especially on cold calls. When you're kind of questioning yourself on a cold call, stand up. I've seen people say it a million times, just smile while you're on the phone. It really does reverberate going back to the other end of the phone. And people can actually feel that energy and feel the enthusiasm that you have about how excited you are to talk about the value that this can provide, and not just, some canned script, but, based on what I understand of this, and this about your business, I felt like these two pieces might help you with these three components based on what I understand, and that way you're kind of showing them that you've done your homework about the business. Yeah.
Again, and you're building a foundation of trust, and as a value provider, and you can use social media, to add value to people and point out things that might be helpful for them. Becoming a domain expert, as Sahil mentioned, as he went through and became an expert in HR, and you became an expert in sales automation, in that way, building that expertise, and then being super excited about it. Sahil, you mentioned you got a new phone, right? And you were so excited about it that you wanted to tell all of your friends about it and show them all the cool features and stuff like that. And I'm sure that's how you feel now about Bravado.
Yeah, I think that to the point that you're mentioning, and coming back to referrals, right, which is where we're kind of the focus of this conversation. Because I think we've gotten really hinged on the relationship, and I think that that's a good thing, right? Because no one's going to give you a referral if they don't like you, right? Let's start there, right? Nobody gives referrals to people that they don't like, right? That's not how the world works. So step one is you got to build a relationship, and I think we've given some good tools and tips around how to do that. I'm always happy to dig into that further, but I think you should really listen to Kevin, because he's the master of building relationships, I've found, and I know that because I get the pleasure of seeing what his customers have to say about working with him on Bravado. So I know how his customers feel about him. So take his words of wisdom much more than mine. But when it comes to referrals, look, I think that there's two things that I see. One is people are scared to ask. Right. That's one thing. And that one I'll just kick over to Kev, because he's got the best answer that I've heard on this. But the second thing is they don't know why the buyer would do it. And this is the part that I want to touch on, right? Which is, why would a buyer, introduce me to someone else? Like what would prompt them to do that? Because psychologically, we scare ourselves into thinking that we're being needy, or that we're asking for favors, or whatever it is. And so let's look at it from a different perspective, right? Which is to say that, let's say you bought a new Tesla. Right? Let's say you got a brand new Tesla and you were super excited about it, and you were driving it around town, and someone asks you like, "Oh wow, nice car," and you're going to spend 20 minutes talking about it. And why are you going to do that? Well, you're going to do that because you attach your value as a person to the things that you buy and the brands that you associate yourself with. And on a smaller scale, but still on the same scale, people do that with software products as well. I was telling you this yesterday when we were chatting, but a vendor that will go unnamed, a competitor to Salesloft, was one of my first tools that I'd used when I was building sales teams. And this particular company, which isn't around anymore, had just done a horrific job of customer support, right? And so it was buggy and it would crash all the time, and we would end up having emails that would bounce back that shouldn't have bounced back, and all sorts of bugs would take place during the process of using their tool. But I didn't know that there was a tool out there that could do something better. And so when I first got introduced to Salesloft and I started using it, it was like revelatory, right? It was like, oh man, like all of these problems are gone. Like there's something that's
you got your Tesla.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I started, right, I ditched the Pinto for the Tesla. And so I ended up sharing Salesloft with a bunch of my peers and a bunch of other VPs of sales everywhere that I went, because we would, this conversation came up all the time, right? This was 2013, 2014. So it was right at the time at which like sales automation was kind of a new thing. And everyone was testing it out, and everyone was using this one competitor, again, that shall go unnamed. And I'd be like, no, like it's a horrible mistake. Like stop using it. Like try this other thing. It's way better. And I did that because among friends, like it's kind of cool to be the one that knows something that the other people don't know. And it's cool to build connections, and human beings are social creatures. And we forget that, because as an SDR or as an AE sitting on the phone, you forget that the buyer is just another human being like you. And just like I'm really excited about my iPhone X or about my Tesla, in the same way, they're really excited about the tools that they're using that are actually working. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with, one, you got to make sure you deliver an exceptional customer experience, both through the services side as well as through the product side. And once you've done that, then make sure that you're able to convince that person to say, hey, look, you're really excited. Now let's open some doors and bring this to your friends, because they're going to be subsequently just as happy as you are. And I think thinking in those terms is just a much better mindset than thinking about, oh, I'm being super needy or whatnot. It's actually saying, hey, look, you're happy with the service I'm providing. Now let me actually help bring that great service to someone who's in need.
Let's make somebody else happy. Let's keep this going. Let's keep the momentum going with this relationship. And so Kevin, like, say you're an SDR and you set up a great meeting, and the meeting went really, really well, and they haven't necessarily bought anything. So you're not quite sure if they're happy. Is that when, if you had a good relationship, could you begin the referral process there, or does it have to be actually after someone's purchase, they're really happy, like Sahil mentioned, and you want to keep that momentum going? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so especially from the SDR point of view, as an SDR, your end goal is not exactly to have them buy tomorrow. It's for them to begin that buying process. So as an SDR, asking very early on is something that is totally acceptable. So what I think is, being able to reach out maybe after that demo has gone off, or after that initial pass has happened, reach out to them, thanking them for taking the call, and let them know that you enjoyed the experience. And if they enjoyed that experience back, ask them, hey, who else in your network might be interested in having a similar conversation like you had with one of the reps on my team today. And probably 9 times out of 10, they're not just going to openly just give you that referral without you asking. But with you asking, they're probably 1 in 3 going to give you one of those referrals. And if you're not going to get it if you don't ask. So as an SDR, I would 100% go in and you can be as unique about it as you want. If you're selling a very enterprise solution, maybe write them a thank you note as a follow-up. Hey, thanks for taking the time to chat with me and my team. By the way, who else should we be talking with that might be in your network? Like Sahil said, people are talking about this, over beers and to their friends, and they're passionate about this type of technology. And If you believe in it, they're going to believe in it, and they're going to start talking about it. So we know that they know people. It's just, you got to ask them, and you got to ask them in a way that doesn't sound needy, but it's like, hey, I've provided some value. Who else can I provide value to? And people are willing to help you, especially when they see the value as well.
Yeah, I really like, both of you guys kind of are giving me the idea of like the momentum of the relationship. It's going well right now. You did a demo, things are going great. Who else can we bring this momentum to within your network and spread out the goodness that we're creating here? So versus like, hey, can you help me out? It's more like, let's get that snowball effect going, because this is awesome. You think it's awesome. And, let's keep it going.
Yeah. It can also go in tandem as well. If you've got a good relationship with that AE, and, that's part of the process. Hey, I enjoyed working with you, and I know that, the AE said that they've been having a good experience and the things are moving in the right direction. Who should we be talking to? And that way you're coming in as a team effort. So you get a referral as an easy flip from an SDR, and that AE has another opportunity on their hands as well. You get a 2-for-1.
I love that. That's a great idea. And Sahil, did you want to mention something there?
No, I think, first of all, I totally agree. I think that makes a ton of sense, Kevin. Look, I think when we're talking about when is the right time to ask for a referral, Kevin kind of said this on a podcast that he and I did a while back, but he's like, every time, right? Every time is the right time to ask. And I think that is, the more that I have seen the stats around, the frequency with which salespeople are able to get referrals using Bravado, the more that I've realized that he's right. Because my initial reaction was actually, I was a little skeptical of that, right? I always thought that you waited until the deal was closed, and then there's this honeymoon period, right? Or there's like this, they're really excited, and it's like they just put pen on paper, and they're really excited to, drive the Tesla off the lot. And so, or beam down from space, or wherever Elon's shipping them. And so, you're going through, and like, that's like the moment, right? Like that, then and there. And I'll tell you something really interesting. So we've seen on Bravado that salespeople are able to get testimonials from buyers who never even bought from them. And I thought that was really fascinating, was that salespeople are able to reach out to buyers that went through the buying process, never actually purchased the product, but are still willing to endorse the seller because of the service that they provided and because of the value that was created during the process. It was like, hey, it didn't work out because we didn't have the budget, or it didn't work out because, my CEO has a relationship with their CEO and like we couldn't buy or whatever. But I still think Kevin's awesome. And if you're looking for sales automation technology, then I think that you should talk to him. And I think like stuff like that is so, it kind of changed my perspective, which was that I used to believe that when you look at the relationship between a buyer and a seller, I used to innately believe that it was like first came the product and then came the person. But more and more, I'm realizing that that's not true. It's that people actually endorse people. And then if the product works out, then that's great. But buyers also realize that that's not in your hands, right? As an SDR, you have no control or very little control over, what happens when the buyer purchases something 6 months later, and then the product team is late in shipping something, and, something breaks or whatever. Like, you have no control over that. But what you always have control over is how you treat people, right? And back to what Kevin was saying about putting a 10 on everyone's forehead. Like, I think that mentality is so powerful, right? Where I have worked for companies where the product didn't always work out, but I still had an awesome relationship with the customer because they liked me, right? It was the fact that they enjoyed working with me. And some of these people, I've been to their wedding, been on vacation with them. Like, I've made genuine friendships with customers who bought and then churned 3 months later and never rebought the product that I was selling. But still to this day, we are friends. And still to this day, they introduced me to other buyers. And still to this day, when I came back with Bravado and I was like, hey, can I meet your sales team? They would still introduce me just because of the fact that we had built a relationship. So I think that you can get referrals from all sources. It's not just like, reach out to the 10 customers that are on your case studies page, and those are the only 10 people that are going to give you a referral. I genuinely believe that you can get referrals from any buyer that you interact with. And it doesn't just even have to be a buyer. It can just be someone that you meet at a conference or whatnot. But you got to put yourself out there. That's what's
I
really
love that. Dude, that's such a great way. You're really playing the long game of building relationships. And I like that image of putting a 10 on everyone's head and really treating them, it's not just prospecting and you're trying to churn through a bunch of stuff. It's like, hey, we're out there building our brand, our personal brand and our relationships and trying to help people. And it's going to come back to you.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you a funny story. So when I first started in sales at a company called Meltwater, so Meltwater had a really interesting CRM system. It was an in-house CRM system. And it was basically just like it was like a news feed for every single account. And so a salesperson would just come in and put notes, and it would be date and time stamped. And then it would just be like a sequence of notes for every account. So I started at the company in 2008. And at that time, Meltwater had been selling in the US for about 3 years. So they started in 2005. So you're talking about 3 years worth of notes from accounts being passed between reps and whatnot. And I remember at the time, Razor scooters. I know to this day that's kind of like maybe they're still around, I think. But
I rode one yesterday.
Oh, I have one. Yeah, I got one for Father's Day.
Now it's called the Bird, and it raises hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Anyway, so Razor scooters were really big. And there was this VP of marketing. I remember her name was Kathleen. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was Kathleen. And so somebody had reached out to her in 2005. And she basically said, if anyone from Meltwater ever calls me again, I'm going to sue your company. Because I guess they just like emailed her so much, right? And so this account had basically been marked like, do not touch, right? Or do not contact. And so I found the account and I was like, no way, right? I'm going to definitely, and at the time I was doing really well in sales, and you have hubris when you're young, and I was like, I can sell to anyone, right? And so I took the account and I was like, I'm going to sell this account this month, right? And that was like my vow. And so I started emailing her and reaching out and trying to like set up like different like test accounts for her and doing a bunch of things. And she finally, and we had like some very, very basic email tracking, and I was waiting, and she hadn't opened a single email in like 25 days. And it was like 2 days left in the month. And she finally opened one of my emails, and I got the alert. And as soon as I got the alert, I called her right away. Terrible sales practice, I'm sure, but it's fine. Yeah, again, 22, what can I say? And so I called her right away. She picks up the phone and she's like, hello? And I was like, Kathleen? And she goes, this better not be Sahil from Meltwater. and I started laughing, and I was like, Kathleen, I don't quite know how to say it is Sahil from Meltwater without you hanging up, but it definitely is Sahil from Meltwater. But I have to tell you something. I was like, look, I am a super uncoordinated fat Indian guy. I've only ridden a Razor scooter once, and I fell off of it and I skinned my elbow. But I'm determined to try it again if you'll give me 30 seconds to chat with you. And she cracked up and she's like, my son's kind of fat too, and he falls off the scooters. And we started talking. And she bought the same day. I managed to close her it was like an hour-long call, and then 2 hours later she signed a $10,000 contract, and she ended up being a customer. And she not only became a customer then, but she actually renewed like 3 times, and then introduced me to someone else who was a VP of marketing at Panera Bread, and it turned into like $100,000 in business. And the only reason that it happened is because when she got on the phone, she, I genuinely, I was so excited to talk to her, because I was like, it was the whole, she was my great whale, it was like Captain Ahab and Moby Dicking it, right? And so I was like so excited to have gotten her on the phone. And she could hear it, right? And she told me after, she was like, I could just hear how excited you were that I was on the phone, and your story was really funny, so I decided to give you a chance. And I think that building those sorts of, and every salesperson has stories like this, right? But it's the fact that we forget that. We forget these moments when we're sitting there day to day, like, how many activities do I need to hit in order to hit my, like screw that, right? Like, build genuine relationships, be yourself, and be authentic. And I think that you'll come a long way. So
yeah, no, I love that. I mean, they say that money follows management, and you always see these founding teams of companies that do really well, and then they sell the company or they go public, and then they pop up a couple of years later with a new company, and then they do really well. And it's like, it's the same with a salesperson like you. You probably have I don't know if you still have a relationship with her, but as you've built these relationships, people kind of are following you. And I had a question that came in about Bravado, and Kevin, I know that you've used Bravado. How does Bravado work in that it's almost like you're building up your referral network through the platform that Sahil has created? You're a user, right, of Bravado?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I love it. I was actually, it went out the company-wide today. They were talking about my Bravado profile, Sahil. So you've got that going for you. But it's not just for referrals, which I definitely leverage it for, but it's about testimonials and building, this place where my prospective buyers can go and understand that, hey, Kevin's a pretty good guy. He's got a track record of all of these people that have willingly and openly said, hey, I've enjoyed the experience that I've had with him. And when my prospective buyers that maybe I haven't gotten to that point with them, and we're talking about golf and things like that, they can go and see that I've got a good track record, and it's going to build some trust for that person. Now they're going to maybe view me a little bit differently than someone that's just coming in off the street that they don't know anything about. They don't know any, like, maybe they're a terrible salesperson. Maybe they have zero people that say nice things about them. At least I can show and kind of promote my own brand of saying, like, by doing business with me, I'm going to do you right. And not only am I going to do you right, I'm going to build a relationship here, and we're going to do business for years to come. And Sahil, like, back to your story of doing business, I still keep in touch with the very second person I ever did a demo with at Salesloft over 3.5 years ago. He lives in Singapore, and we still keep in touch. And I actually saw him in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. We went out to Dolores Park. We hang out now. We are actual, like, genuinely friends. And I've known him for 3.5 years, the very second person I ever did a demo with, because we just built rapport immediately and stayed in touch. And, it's now he's probably given me 5, 6, 7 referrals over the years. He's never bought from me either.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting point that you made, Sahil, in that these relationships, it's people to people. And maybe, after the demo, they don't end up buying, but you guys actually end up being friends and keeping in touch and just building your relationship, building your network over the years. And who knows what's going to happen, it could lead to some kind of commercial success, or it could just be another friend that you have. You can never have too many friends. So I love that. And one other quick question that came in, Kevin, was, do you use Salesloft at all, like the cadences and whatnot, for your building your referral process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a cadence set up for when I win a new deal. We send out a welcome email. Welcome to Salesloft. Here's what you signed up for. Here's what you get. Here's our implementations team. And then, so I send that out, and that is step 1 of my particular cadence. And then naturally, I've already asked them for referrals like 4 times already throughout the process. And but then I'm going to ask them again, and I'm going to stay in touch with them. I want to check in with them, make sure everything's going well. And throughout that process, I'm going to be asking them for referrals. So step 2 of my cadence, I want to say it's like day 15. So like 3 full weeks. So 15 business days later, I'm popping back in. Second step of my cadence is, hey, just want to check in. How's the implementation going? Who else am I in your network should I be doing business with? Do you have anybody in mind that you can shoot over, or even make a warm intro? So it's 100% a referral-based cadence, and it's built off of the welcome emails I send regularly anyway. Why not just have a second and third step where, hey, bump at the top of your inbox on step 3, any referrals for me? Like, who you got that I should be talking to?
Yeah. I think
as blatant as that.
Main takeaway is just, if you're not asking, on a consistent basis and keeping that momentum going and treating everybody in your network with a great deal of respect, you're definitely losing out, because I'd rather, have a warm intro through a referral any day than just trying to cold call somebody or cold email a stranger. That's it.
And just quickly to hop in on that point, it's not just the salesperson that prefers warm intros, it's also the buyer.
That's true.
I don't know of very many buyers who love getting cold called or love getting a cold email. But and so two things on this. So one, let's talk about efficacy, and second, let's talk about psychology. So efficacy wise, on Bravado, we've gotten hundreds of referrals now, and I stay in close contact with our members. And so I've been collecting these stats, and actually our VP of marketing is going to kill me because we were supposed to turn this into like a thing, but David, you get it today. And so
sneak preview.
For the referrals that have come in through Bravado, and I think we're at 600-700 now over the course of the last couple months, 80% of them turned into a meeting. So I don't know of any other program that any salesperson has ever run that has an 80% meeting set rate, right? So 80% of the referrals that have come in through Bravado have turned into a meeting. And obviously a lot of these are still in flight and whatnot, but to this day, 25% have turned into deals. So 1 in 4 of the referrals that have come in have actually turned into deals. And that just blows my mind, right? When you think about the average win rate of like cold lead to deal, I mean, you'd be thrilled with 1% or 2%, right? You'd be thrilled with a 5% meeting set rate, right? And 1 in 5 meetings turning into a deal would be an incredible, successful campaign, right? And so as a salesperson, you're really doing yourself a disservice if you're focusing exclusively. And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that referrals are the only way to sell, but I'm saying that they are your best sources of leads and they have the least amount of friction because you're coming in with that modicum of trust already, right? Again, and I want to point out and back to the way that this works at Bravado when we were first launching, actually before we even launched the product, I wanted to, one of our goals was we wanted to have the best salespeople in B2B on our platform. And so the way that we did that is I reached out to, I think it was a network, I've been doing this for a while, I'm getting old, so I've got a big network of buyers. So I reached out to about 5,000 technology buyers. And I said, who's the best salesperson you've ever bought something from? Right? And that was it. It was just an open question. Who's the best salesperson you've ever bought something from? And we got somewhere in the vicinity of 1,600 or something like that responses back, 1,600 or so responses back. And Kevin had 6 times as many people vote for him than anybody else. And that's how I met Kevin. So the way I met Kevin was because his buyers told me, his customers, with no incentive, reached out to me and said, hey, Kevin is the best salesperson I've ever bought something from. And so then I emailed Kevin and I have the email somewhere of hey man, I don't know who you are, but I'm really interested in getting.
Do you want a job?
but I would love to have a conversation with you because ain't nobody's writing that about me, right? So then we and that's how Kevin and I met. So the power of building a reputation, the power of putting a 10 on your customer's forehead. I mean, that's how Kevin and I connected, and I feel like there's a lot to that, which is to say that, if his customers are willing to stand up and say, this is the best salesperson I've ever worked with in my career, then that means that they're also willing to do that with other peers of theirs, right? If they're willing to do it with me, who was just randomly asking because I was trying to figure something out for my company, then surely when they're actually have a peer who's struggling with sales automation or who's struggling with their current vendor, Kevin's going to be the first person that's going to come to mind. And I think that, striving for excellence as a salesperson is underappreciated and underrated. I think that we champion revenue and deals closed and yeah, that's all of course important. But it is just as, if not more important, that you build your brand as a salesperson of somebody that buyers trust and they want to do business with, and that they openly and willingly are happy to endorse, because that goes a really long way.
It does. And definitely, if you guys on the webinar and listening to the recording, if you haven't signed up for Bravado, it's just bravado.co, right? To get their profile set up so that you can start to reach out, build up your brand like Kevin has done. And then Sahil and Kevin are you guys are on LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect with you, I would assume, because this is awesome, man. I want to go back and like transcribe this because these are some great notes and some great learnings. I don't see any other questions that have come in. You guys, thank you so much for your time and sharing this information with us. We just really appreciate it, and good luck continuing to ask for referrals.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on. That was a lot of fun. If I could leave a little tidbit for everybody, I challenge everybody to go get as many referrals as they can in the next month. And when you get a referral, write them a handwritten note as a thank you. It goes a long way. The snail mail's back, and what's old is new again. And people will really appreciate that, and that's just going to build your brand even better.
Nice, dude. All right. So that's a challenge that Kevin put out. Let's see how many referrals you can get in the month of April, since we're coming up on the end of March. In the month of April, how many referrals can you ask for? How many can you get? Ping Kevin through LinkedIn and let him know. And
tweet about him. Tweet about it.
You know?
Yeah, I love it. And one more, and just one more thing, as we're coming up on the end of the quarter as well, I think something that's highly underappreciated is when you start April and everyone's building pipe again and everyone's like, all right, time to roll up the sleeves and get ready for Q2. I would challenge you to reach out to all of your old contacts. I would challenge you to go back and reach out to people that you sold to a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, people that you met at a conference. Go through your LinkedIn network and find all of the people that you had a relationship with that you've let go stale, because that happens to all of us, right? And reach out to them and just connect with them. Don't ask for anything. Don't ask for a referral. Just reach out and maintain those relationships with people that you genuinely like and trust and want to continue to work with, because I promise you that it will pay dividends in ways that you will not be able to predict right now. You will never be able to predict it. But you know, the relationships that you build, the friendships that you build, the people that you stay in touch with, it's a really small world, and everybody knows everybody. And so a few friends here, a few friends there, you never know. There's going to be that massive deal 2 years later that you're going to try to close, and all of a sudden you realize that this person's actually connected with that person, and then you'll be able to reach every great salesperson has the story of like a massive deal that was almost done and then kind of hit the brakes, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere you found a champion who endorsed you and came in. Everybody knows this story, right? But the great salespeople, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens because they're thoughtful and they know to do it throughout the course of their career so that they can set themselves up for that lucky break. And I would say set yourself up for success in the future. Play the long game. Don't just worry about hitting your activity quotas every week, but really start thinking about your relationship quota and what sort of brand you're building for yourself as a seller.
I love it. I love it. Plant those seeds for long-term success. And you have another challenge now from Sahil. So, you know, as we get toward the first week in April, go through, reconnect as much as you can. Let us know how it goes. And guys, again, thank you so much for being on the webinar today, sharing your wisdom, and really look forward to continue to talk about this with you guys and working with you.
Likewise. Thanks for having us on.
Take care, Double Ds.
All right. Take care. Thanks a lot.
See ya.